They say time heals all wounds, but grief has its own stubborn rhythm, and betrayal makes the wound even deeper. I'm Cecilia, born in 1954 in Adelaide, South Australia. Back in 2022, at the age of 68, I buried my husband Henry, the only man I thought I could trust with my soul. I felt broken and hollow, but then something happened that turned grief into a battlefield. Today, at 71, I'm finally sharing this because silence only feeds injustice. If you're listening, drop your country below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. The day of Henry's funeral should have been one of solemn remembrance. The church smelled faintly of roses, their petals already wilting from the summer heat. I stood by the casket, clutching a handkerchief, trying to draw strength from every memory of his laughter. People whispered kind words, neighbors and colleagues offering their condolences. But as the organ hummed softly and the minister began his eulogy, the wooden doors creaked open, and in walked Veronica, Henry's ex-wife, her arm linked with a tall young man whose presence sent a strange chill through the room. Gasps spread like wildfire. Veronica hadn't been seen in our community for over 25 years. She looked unchanged, sharp cheekbones, immaculate dress, eyes that carried no grief, only calculation. The young man, Adrian, had Henry's height, his dark hair, and a certain way of holding his shoulders that made my stomach twist. She led him down the aisle boldly, ignoring the hostile stares, and stopped directly in front of me. "This is Adrian," she announced loudly, her voice slicing through the reverent silence. "Henry's son. He deserves to be recognized here, not hidden in the shadows." I felt the room tilt. My fingers gripped the edge of the pew to stop myself from falling. "That's impossible," I whispered, but Veronica's smirk told me she had come prepared for this very confrontation. People began murmuring, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I caught the minister's startled glance, but he hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Veronica pushed on, her eyes never leaving mine. "He has Henry's blood. And he has rights. You may have worn the ring in the later years, Cecilia, but don't think you'll walk away with everything." Anger churned inside me, sharp and hot. This was Henry's funeral, and she had turned it into a theater of claims. I wanted to scream, to throw her out, but grief held me like chains. My mind replayed Henry's words from years ago, how Veronica had been greedy, how their marriage had rotted from her constant demands. He had never once mentioned a child. Adrian stood silently, his expression unreadable, but when his eyes met mine, I saw uncertainty flicker beneath his practiced calm. That only deepened the ache in my chest. Was there truth in this? Had Henry carried such a secret all these years? The reception afterwards was no refuge. People avoided my eyes, whispering in corners. Veronica moved through the hall as though she owned it, speaking with journalists who had somehow caught wind of her appearance. I overheard her declare to one reporter, "Henry abandoned us, but Adrian will finally claim his place." I clenched my fists, struggling to breathe. Friends tried to comfort me, but their pity felt like a knife. Even in mourning, I was being pushed into the role of defender, forced to fight for the very life Henry and I had built together. Later that evening, I walked through the ranch, 1,450 acres of land Henry had poured his heart into. The fields glowed beneath the fading light, every fence post and barn beam a testament to his labor. It should have comforted me, but all I felt was dread. If Veronica's words held any sway, this land, this legacy, could be torn from me. I sat on the porch and pressed Henry's wedding band against my lips. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered into the darkening air. My heart longed for answers only he could give. The following week, the whispers grew louder. I received a letter from Veronica's solicitor, formally announcing Adrian's intention to claim half of Henry's estate. The words blurred before my eyes, but the threat was unmistakable. She wasn't bluffing, this was war. Neighbors began to avoid me, unsure which side to take. Some whispered that Adrian truly resembled Henry. Others shook their heads, insisting Veronica was manipulating grief for money. I felt trapped between doubt and fury. As though grief wasn't enough punishment, I had to defend myself against ghosts from a past that was never mine. One night, I gathered Henry's photographs, searching desperately for clues. His smile, his hands around my shoulders, his steady gaze, they all seemed to plead for my trust. He had promised me again and again that Veronica was gone for good. If Adrian had been his, why would he hide it from me, from everyone? The more I stared, the more I resolved not to let Veronica trample on his memory. The breaking point came 2 weeks later when Veronica arrived at the ranch uninvited. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel and stepped out to see her black car parked boldly by the gate. She stepped out in heels too fine for country ground, Adrian behind her. "This is his home," she declared, surveying the land with greedy eyes. "And soon, it will be ours." "Get off my property," I said, my voice shaking but firm. Adrian shifted uncomfortably. "Mum, maybe quiet," she snapped, silencing him. Then she turned to me with a sly smile. "You can't fight blood, Cecilia. Courts don't care about sentiment. Prepare yourself." I held my ground, though my chest felt ready to collapse. Watching them drive away, dust rising behind their tires, I knew the fight had truly begun. My grief had no space to breathe anymore. It had been invaded by rage, suspicion, and a looming storm that threatened everything Henry and I had built. That night, I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, papers and old files scattered before me, searching for anything Henry might have left behind. Veronica thought she could scare me into surrender, but she didn't know the kind of woman I had become beside Henry, the woman who had worked these fields, managed accounts, fought droughts and debts. If she wanted war, she would have it. Still, in the quiet hours, I let myself cry because beneath the fury was fear, and beneath the fear, a lonely ache that no battle could ever erase. The letter from Veronica's solicitor lay heavy on my desk, its sharp words cutting through my grief like a blade that refused to dull. I stared at it for hours, rereading the demand that Adrian be recognized as Henry's rightful heir. Every sentence was coded in arrogance, every line daring me to collapse under pressure. But instead of breaking, something hardened inside me. This wasn't just about money or land. It was about Henry's legacy, about my own dignity, about refusing to let lies tear apart the truth of the life we had built together. The next morning, I drove into town to see Thomas Ward, a solicitor who had once handled contracts for Henry. His office was tucked above a small bookshop, papers stacked high, the air smelling faintly of old leather and ink. He rose when I entered, his face lined but kind, eyes alert with the sort of quiet wisdom Henry had trusted. "Cecilia," he said softly, taking my hand. "I was sorry to hear about Henry. He respected you more than anyone." I swallowed back tears. "Thomas, I need help. Veronica's back. She claims Henry had a son, Adrian. They're demanding half of everything." His brow furrowed. "That woman hasn't changed. Always circling, waiting for an opportunity." He gestured for me to sit. "Tell me everything." I laid out the events of the funeral, the solicitor's letter, the whispers spreading through town. He listened intently, then leaned back, steepling his fingers. "First step, we gather evidence. Henry would never leave you exposed. Did he keep documents? Letters? Anything?" I nodded slowly. "He was meticulous. I just don't know where to start looking." That evening, I returned to the ranch with new determination. I searched the study first drawers of ledgers, files of contracts, receipts neatly folded. Nothing obvious appeared. Frustrated, I sank into Henry's leather chair, inhaling the faint scent of his cologne still lingering. My fingers brushed against the underside of the desk, catching on a small ridge. With trembling hands, I pressed. A hidden panel popped open, revealing a slim wooden box. Inside were papers yellowed with age and a small cassette tape. My heart pounded as I unfolded the top document. It was a divorce agreement clear as daylight signed by both Henry and Veronica, stating that she waived all future claims to his estate in exchange for a generous settlement. My eyes widened as I realized what this meant. She had no legal ground. Beneath the agreement lay handwritten notes, Henry's voice echoing in every stroke of the pen. He wrote about Veronica's greed, about her attempt to use a child as leverage once before, a child whose paternity was never proven. My hands shook as I read, the words confirming what I had always sensed: she was capable of anything to extract wealth. Then I held the tape. I dug out an old player from the attic, dusted it off, and pressed play. Henry's voice filled the room, raw and steady. "If you're hearing this, Cecilia, it means Veronica has returned. I don't trust her. She thrives on deceit. Remember this. You are my true partner, my only confidant. Protect what we built. Trust no one who brings her name." Tears streamed down my cheeks. It was as though Henry had reached across time to stand beside me, guiding me through the storm. I clutched the tape like a lifeline, knowing it would be a weapon Veronica couldn't anticipate. The next day, I returned to Thomas with the documents and recording. He studied them carefully, his eyes lighting with cautious hope. "This is powerful, Cecilia. The divorce agreement alone undermines her claims. And this tape, it shows Henry's clear intent and his distrust of her." He tapped the papers. "We'll need more. If she brings a DNA test forward, we'll challenge its validity. But this could turn the tide." Meanwhile, Veronica's campaign of intimidation grew relentless. Accounts tied to the ranch were suddenly frozen, leaving me scrambling to pay workers and keep operations afloat. Journalists camped near the gates, feeding on the scandal. Headlines screamed about the hidden heir and the first wife's return. Every time I ventured into town, eyes followed me, some filled with sympathy, others with doubt. One afternoon, I sought comfort from Martha Alvarez, my neighbor and dear friend. Her farmhouse smelled of cinnamon, her hands warm as she clasped mine. "Don't let her shake you, Cecilia," she said firmly. "You've stood through droughts, storms, and loss. This is just another storm. Stand tall. People will see the truth." Her words stitched courage back into my heart. That evening, I wrote an open letter, pouring out my story not to beg for pity, but to set the record straight. I described Veronica's history, her settlement, her return timed with Henry's death. I published it in the local paper and online. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in, neighbors rallied, and slowly, the whispers shifted in my favor. But Veronica wasn't finished. She went on national television, painting herself as the abandoned first wife, Adrian at her side like a prop. She spoke with trembling lips about betrayal, about raising a son alone while Henry lavished wealth on me. Watching it, my stomach churned. She was skilled at twisting truth into pity. For a moment, I feared the tide would turn again. Thomas reassured me. "Let her speak. We'll counter in court where facts matter more than tears." Still, the invasion grew unbearable. Drones buzzed over the ranch, snapping photographs of my property. I felt hunted, exposed. I filed complaints and Thomas arranged legal protections, but the damage was done, my privacy shattered, my grief exploited. At night, I walked the fields, the silence broken only by crickets. I pressed Henry's ring to my lips again and again, whispering, "I will not let her win." Each star above seemed to echo his voice, urging me forward. The weeks blurred into preparation, collecting affidavits, securing statements from Reverend James, who recalled Veronica's earlier attempt to claim money with a false child. Every piece of evidence became a stone in the fortress I was building around Henry's legacy. By the time the court date was set, I was no longer just a widow in mourning. I had become a defender, armed with truth and resolve. Veronica thought grief would weaken me, but she had underestimated the kind of strength born from love, from memory, from the stubborn refusal to surrender what was rightfully mine. The storm had gathered. Now it was time to face it head-on. The courthouse in Melbourne rose like a fortress, its stone columns casting long shadows across the plaza as I walked up the steps. My hands trembled, but not from fear. This was adrenaline, the final charge after weeks of torment. The weight of Henry's memory pressed against me like armor, his words on that cassette tape echoing in my chest. Veronica was already there, dressed in sleek black, Adrian trailing at her side. She met my eyes with a smile that was both smug and poisonous, as if she had already written the ending of the story. Inside the courtroom, whispers floated like dust. Reporters lined the benches, cameras flashing before the judge entered. When proceedings began, Veronica's lawyer wasted no time painting her as the forgotten first wife, abandoned with a child, left destitute while Henry lavished his fortune on me. Every sentence was rehearsed, designed to pull heartstrings and stir anger. Then Adrian took the stand. His voice was steady at first, speaking of a childhood without a father, of watching his mother struggle. He held up a DNA test, a glossy report that claimed with certainty that Henry was his biological father. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. For a moment, doubt pierced me. What if it was true? But I studied Adrian's face, and behind his words, I saw the flicker of unease, the way his eyes darted to Veronica for approval after every line. When it was our turn, Thomas rose with quiet power. He presented the divorce agreement first, its ink faded but still undeniable. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "this document shows that Veronica Harrison willingly waived all claims to Henry Whitaker's estate in exchange for a settlement paid in full. Her rights ended over 2 decades ago." Veronica's lawyer tried to object, but the judge leaned forward, studying the signatures. The murmurs in the room shifted. Next came the testimony of Reverend James, his voice calm but resolute. He recalled Veronica approaching him years ago, attempting to validate another child as Henry's in exchange for money. The court grew still, the story a mirror of what was happening now. Then Thomas pressed play on the cassette tape. Henry's voice filled the courtroom, steady and strong, as though he had stepped back into the world just to defend me. "If Veronica ever returns," he said, "remember she thrives on deceit. Cecilia is the woman I trust with everything. She alone should protect what we built." Gasps filled the room again, but this time they were for me. Tears slipped down my cheeks as Henry's words wrapped around me like a shield. Veronica shifted uncomfortably, her bravado cracking under the sound of the man who had known her best. Finally, Thomas addressed the DNA test. He revealed inconsistencies in the lab's chain of custody, pointing out that Veronica had organized it privately with no court oversight. Then he produced a sworn statement from Henry's physician, confirming that Henry had undergone fertility complications in his early years of marriage with Veronica. The implication was clear: Adrian's parentage was far from certain. When the judge called for recess, I stepped outside into the corridor. Veronica stormed past me, her heels clicking furiously against the tiles. "This isn't over," she hissed, her face pale with rage. I looked her straight in the eye and whispered, "It already is." Back inside, the judge delivered the verdict. He dismissed Veronica's claims entirely, citing the divorce agreement, the questionable DNA, and Henry's own recorded words. He ordered that the matter of fraud and potential extortion be referred to the prosecutor. The gavel struck, final and undeniable. The courtroom erupted, some cheering, some shouting questions, cameras flashing like lightning. I sat frozen, relief flooding me so completely I could barely breathe. It was over. After months of being dragged through mud, Henry's truth had prevailed. But I wasn't finished. Outside the courthouse, Veronica tried to slip into her car, reporters swarming around her. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Veronica, leave this place and never return. You've stolen enough peace, told enough lies. The world will now see you for what you are." Later that week, evidence of her manipulations spread across the news, details of her past settlement, her attempt to falsify claims, and the cracks in Adrian's story. Charges of fraud and attempted extortion followed. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe freely on the ranch without feeling watched. But victory alone didn't heal the wounds. Grief still lingered, heavy and silent. To carry Henry's memory forward, I founded the Whitaker Trust, a foundation dedicated to widows who had lost everything, women caught in battles like mine, who needed strength and resources to rebuild. I poured myself into it, turning my rage and sorrow into something that could outlast me. The ranch thrived again. Workers returned, neighbors visited without hesitation, the land breathing with life once more. At dusk, I often sat on the porch, watching the sun slip behind the fields Henry loved, the cicadas singing their ancient songs. Some nights, I swore I could still hear his voice in the wind, reminding me that truth is stronger than lies, that love outlives greed. When Adrian wrote to me months later, apologizing for letting his mother use him, I didn't hate him. He was young, caught in her shadow. I sent him a letter back, not forgiving Veronica, but offering him a choice to build his own life, free of her manipulation. Whether he would, only time would tell. As for me, I found peace in resilience. I had stood my ground when the world expected me to crumble. I had fought not just for land or money, but for honor, for Henry's legacy, for the truth we shared. And now, telling you this story, I want you to remember, never let lies define your life. Never let grief silence your strength. Moral lesson: when betrayal rises, let truth and courage be your shield. Even in grief, stand tall, for resilience turns wounds into wisdom and justice. If this story touched you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, and comment below the lesson you've learned.